Have you ever tried to save more money but have found it really difficult? Maybe you change your mobile plan, you stop buying expensive coffee, or you even made a budget, which is great by the way, but it never seems to be working. That's why in today's video, I'm going to give you 5 very powerful yet simple strategies to help you double your savings in 2025. So whether you're saving for the down payment for a house or maybe to develop your emergency fund, this video is going to definitely be useful for you. And we're going to start immediately with strategy number 1, which is reevaluating your top spending categories. In Japan, the top spending categories are food, housing, transportation, which is very similar to the US where you have housing, transportation, food, and insurance as the top categories. I think, and others do as well, that small changes on those very big categories are going to be the most effective. So rather than focusing on how much you can save on expensive coffee or boba tea, it's going to be just a few $100s a year. Focus on those top categories that are the most effective. For example, let's start with housing. Something you can do if you are renting is look at your rent and what is included in there. Maybe you have some amenities. Maybe you have parking space including in your rent. And maybe you do not use it. In this case, go to your landlord and tell them how much discount can I get if I'm not using this amenity or if I'm not using the parking space. Maybe you're going to get a discount. And worst case scenario, you're going to get the big, no, sorry, you can't do it. So there is no basically downside to it. Most people don't like to do that and go into negotiating, especially here in Japan. But honestly, I think it's really worth it. It's at least worth a try. And if you're shopping to buy an apartment or a house, think about not buying a brand new one in a super trendy area. Go for a second-hand house, maybe a fixer-upper in a less trendy area. The cost is going to be much better. This is actually the case for this very house. When we look for it, we look for a second-hand house in not such a trendy area. And the price difference was really big. Okay, I get a little bit more commute, but honestly, this price difference is definitely worth it. Another one you can look at is transportation budget. If you're actually driving to work, maybe some days you can do carpooling or you can actually use the public transportation. Okay, I understand. If you are living outside a big metro area in the US or Canada, public transportation may not be an option. In that case, okay, but you only have carpool, I should say. But if you have good public transportation, it is definitely worth it and you're going to save a lot of money. Another way you can save a lot of money on transportation is looking at your auto insurance bill. Maybe you just call a competitor's insurance and ask them for a quote. You might be surprised. And if you don't really want to call, that's okay. You can also check some websites. In the US, you have Policy Genius. In Japan, you have kakaku.com and you can compare. And another good trick is to actually use the same company for your auto insurance and your home insurance. Sometimes combining together gets you some discounts. Those are the little things that can make a huge difference at the end of the year in terms of how much you can save. Strategy number 2 is reverse budgeting, or as I prefer calling it, pay yourself first. Basically, every month you start by putting your savings aside or pay yourself first, as Robert Kiyosaki always says. Let me give you an example of how it works. For example, you are making $5,000 a month and you want to save $500 every month. So at the very beginning of the month, as soon as you get paid, you take $500, you put it in your savings and you leave off $4,500 for all of your living expenses, housing, food, transportation, credit card, health, you name it. This is not easy, so let me give you a few tips on how to get that going. First, you're gonna go back to your monthly expenses. You take, for example, 3 months worth of expenses, so that gives you a better idea of how your expenses are working month over month and you don't have any seasonality or any accident. Then you look at all your top expenses and you go through it and you see if you're spending too much here or there and you try to find ways to reduce so you fit into this new budget of $4,500. And the mind works fantastic well because if that's the only money you have, that's the only money you're gonna be starting to actually be spending. Now, in terms of how much you should be saving, a good number is 20%. So if you go back to our example earlier of $5,000 a month, 20% of this is $1,000. That's a very big number, I understand. However, if you're finding that currently you're saving between $3,000 and 5% of your money only, which by the way is the average in the US and in Japan as well. Maybe you want to start with a smaller number, like 10% savings. Already, if you were to start saving 10%, you would be doubling or tripling the current average and your current average. And if you were to save 20%, you'd be multiplying by 4 or 5 times what you are currently saving or what the average American or the average Japanese is saving, which would be already a great achievement. Being at 20% also ensures that you're going to set aside enough money to grow over time and have a very cushy retirement. Because I'm assuming that even when I say you're going to save 20%, if you don't get there, maybe you're going to arrive at 18%, 15%, or 12%, which is already a pretty good amount of money to be saving, to be investing, and to have a return over time. Let's say you're starting saving at 25, about 15% of your income. And we said that it was a $60,000 annual income that you have. You save 15% over 30 years at an average of 8%, you're going to end up with $2.5 million at the end. That's a pretty good amount of money. But even if you can do only 10%, which is $6,000 a year over 30 years at 8%, you're going to end up with $1.5 million, almost $1.6 million after 40 years, which is still a pretty good amount of money. And those numbers show how small, consistent investment and efforts can give you fantastic results over time thanks to the law of compounding interest. And before we go to strategy number 3, it would mean a lot to us if you could give this video a like for the YouTube algorithm so that it's shown to more people, and that would help us a lot. Thank you very much. So now let's continue with strategy number 3, which is automation. Automation, it's a way to increase your savings rates this year without thinking about it too much because it's automatic, and also because a lot of things in money management is down to behavior and making it as less friction as possible. So you can do it really easily by just setting an automatic rule within your checking account to go directly to your savings account. Let me give you an example, my own example. I'm paid at the end of every month. So what I've done is that as soon as the money comes into my checking account, which is called a Futsuyokin, I have an automatic rule that the money is sent to my savings account. And I do that the next day or the next working days to avoid the problem with public holidays. But this certain amount of money goes not even in my savings account, it goes directly to my iDeco account, which is the equivalent of 400k for you guys, and my NISA account, which is the equivalent of the IRA or Roth IRA if you're in the US, as well as a little bit into my regular savings accounts if you want for extra cash. This allows me to save automatically without thinking about it. And in this case, it is combining also number 2, which was paying myself first, with number 3, which is this one, automatic saving. And actually, it's a bit like forced savings. And if you are in the US, for example, and if you have a 401k, the money is deducted from your paycheck before it even arrives on your banking account, right? So you don't think about it, you reduce your budget or your expenses based on how much money you actually receive. And that's why it's working out so well. You're not thinking about it, you're not seeing the money. It's really a psychological trick for us humans because we adapt to whatever the money we have in front of us and we're gonna spend it. It's very difficult to adapt and not actually spending it. That's just the way it is, right? So it's a really, really good way for you to save more money automatically, reducing your expense and reducing and compressing a bit your monthly budget. Even if it's not super easy, but automation works really well. Strategy number 4 is called working backward, and that might be one of the easiest strategies to help you double your savings in 2025. Let's run it through an example to make it easy to understand. Let's say you are saving $6,000 a year currently and you want to go up to $12,000. So let's look at how much money you're gonna need to save incrementally to reach that goal on a monthly basis. On a monthly basis, easily, it's $500, but that's still a big number. So let's break it down a little bit further, and it's gonna be $125 a week. So it's a little bit more manageable, isn't it? It's more tangible, it's a smaller chunk, it's less intimidating. According to a lot of researches, actually, when you take a big goal and you divide it into sub-goals, it makes it easier to achieve. So the sum of all the small sub-goals become your big goal, and it's easier to stick to your goal and to actually achieve it. I'll leave the links down below if you want to go further into all the psychology of it. And actually the same goes for other types of goals, like working out. If I tell you you need to work out 96 times a year, which is almost 100, you're going to be like, no way I'm finding the time. But if I tell you it's twice a week or once every 3 days, it makes it much more reasonable, manageable. You can put that in your schedule and it works, right? And actually that's how it worked for me when I decided to work out more regularly again. I decided to go every 3 days. And some days I have the time for 20 minutes or half an hour. Sometimes I just have the time for 10 minutes. And that's great. And sometimes I challenge myself to go 4 times a week, 5 times a week when I have time. And actually last week, I had the time for 5 times. It sounded great. So what I propose is, why don't you share with everybody down below what are your goals? And you break it down by months or week, and we look at each other's goal and we encourage each other's to do well, and we keep each other's accountable. I'm looking forward to watching them and reading them, and we can work together on achieving those goals. Our last strategy is strategy number 5, and it's called the vault account, or like I prefer to say, the treasure chest account. It's a big mental trick to put your money far away where you cannot touch it and cannot see it. Think of it as an account that's locked, buried somewhere that you can't touch for casual spending only when there is a specific reason or a specific objective you reach to touch it. And the way you set it up is super simple, and it's like you would do for any emergency fund account or savings account. You open it in a separate bank that's not your main bank. And for example, if you are banking at Bank of America, you open it in a completely different bank, like regional bank, that doesn't have many branches around you, so you don't think about it, to avoid temptation. For me, I'm at Prestia, maybe I'm going to go into other regional bank I'm not going to touch. So there are 3 things you can do, 3 rules you have to set up to make it work. First, it's automated, like we said before, automatic from your checking account directly to your saving, like other savings. Automatically, you don't think about it, it's just gone. Rule number 2, you set for yourself objectives. And you have to reach those objectives before you can actually touch it. For example, it's an amount of money that you want to save. $6,000, $15,000, $20,000, whatever it is. Or it's when you reach the amount for down payment for a house, for example. Or it's a critical family situation. Let's say health emergency or any kind of emergency that if you don't touch this money, then you're going to get into debt and your emergency fund is not enough. So you get the idea. It has to be very, very specific. And number 3, you make it difficult to touch. How do you do that? Well, if it's a bank with physical location I was mentioning before, those locations have to be far away from you. You don't go, you don't see them, you're in commuting, you don't see them on the weekend, you're not tempting to think about it. If it's an internet bank, it's not an internet bank you use regularly, and you make sure you don't have any means of payment linked to that. So you don't have a debit card, you don't have a credit card on this account. It's not on your Google Pay, Apple Pay, Venmo, PayPal, what can I think? In Japan, it could be Line, it could be PayPay. So you're not tempted to touch it until you reach your goal that you set up and we talked in step number 2. This is a fantastic mind trick for you to put money away in this treasure chest that you just opened when you reach your goal. So here you go. These are my 5 top strategies to help you try to double your savings within 2025. Do not hesitate to let me know in the comment section down below which one you prefer the best, which one you want to try, or maybe if you have a different strategy that you want to share with everybody. I'm going to read all the comments. Do not hesitate to like and subscribe if you haven't done it already, and to check those videos to go deeper into money management and investment. Thank you again for watching, and until next time, goodbye.